This week in history, October 6, 1981, marks 38 years since the assassination of Egyptian President Anwar Sadat. It all began in 1978 when U.S. President Jimmy Carter mediated a peace treaty between Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat of Egypt. Resultingly, Sadat's popularity grew in the West and fell in the Arab world and with the Soviet government, according to Britannica. The New York Times recounts that on October 6, 1981, Sadat was shot to death by Islamic militants during a parade commemorating Egypt and Syria's victory over Israel in the Yom Kippur War of 1973. The assassination occurred when a truck carrying Army officer Khalid Islambouli stopped in front of the president's reviewing stand. Islambouli began hurling grenades towards Sadat, and 3 other extremists fired indiscriminately into the crowd, killing Sadat and 11 others.
When he was here in Plains just a few weeks ago, he told me that he hoped to step down as president of Egypt next year, that he thought his work was basically completed. I don't know how to pay tribute to a man like him.
10 years later, October 11th, 1991, marks 28 years since Anita Hill testified that Supreme Court nominee Clarence Thomas sexually harassed her years prior. This occurring during Clarence Thomas's Supreme Court confirmation hearings. The hearings were led by current presidential candidate and ex-Vice President Joe Biden. In 1981, Anita Hill went to work at the U.S. Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, where she served as a legal advisor to Thomas, who was Assistant Secretary. According to Britannica, during that time, she claimed Thomas began to make unwanted sexual advances.
Judge Thomas began to use work situations to discuss sex. He spoke about acts that he had seen in pornographic films involving such matters as women having sex with animals and films showing group sex or rape scenes.
Thomas moved to the Employment Opportunity Commission. In 1982, Hill followed him. However, she alleged that the harassment restarted. Hill finally left in 1983 for a teaching position at Oral Roberts University. By 1991, President George H.W. Bush nominated Thomas to replace Thurgood Marshall on the Supreme Court. During the hearings, Thomas emphatically denied that at no time did he ever sexually harass Anita Hill.
And from my standpoint, as a black American, as far as I'm concerned, it is a high-tech lynching for uppity blacks who in any way deign to think for themselves, to do for themselves, to have different ideas. And it is a message that unless you kowtow to an old order, this is what will happen to you.
In the end, Thomas was confirmed to the High Court by a historically narrow margin of 52 to 48. He remains only the second black person to be appointed a Supreme Court justice.
So if somebody makes a broad allegation against you, what would you do?
Ask them to prove it, I guess.
Yeah.
Was the Anita Hill that testified on the Hill the Anita Hill that you knew at EESC?
She was not the demure, religious, conservative person that they portrayed. That's not the person I knew.
Who was the person you knew?
She could defend herself, let's just put it that way. And she did not take slights very kindly.